My name is Lucia, and I'm 32 years old. I never imagined my wedding day would become the most painful reminder that I've always been second best in my family. Standing alone in my white dress, checking my phone repeatedly, I finally accepted the truth no bride should face. Not a single family member showed up. Not my parents. Not my sister. Not even my best friend, Amanda. They all chose my sister's last-minute engagement party instead. Before I tell you how I ended up standing alone in my wedding dress waiting for a family that never came, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by the people who should have loved you the most. I grew up in a middle-class suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, where our family of 4 lived in a comfortable 2-story home with a fenced backyard. My parents, Michael and Diana Watson, had steady jobs, Dad as a financial advisor, and Mom as an elementary school teacher. Our family looked picture-perfect from the outside, but inside our home, a different story unfolded every day. From my earliest memories, I can recall the stark difference in how my parents treated me compared to my younger sister, Natalie. 4 years my junior, Natalie arrived when I was just starting to understand the world around me. I vividly remember my mother bringing her home from the hospital, a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket that somehow managed to eclipse my existence in an instant. "Look at those beautiful blue eyes," relatives would gush. "She's going to be a heartbreaker." Meanwhile, I stood in corners at family gatherings, my own hazel eyes watching as everyone gravitated toward my baby sister. It wasn't just her infancy that drew attention. As we grew, the pattern solidified into our family dynamic. When I brought home straight A's in 7th grade, my parents gave a cursory "good job" before returning to their activities. 3 years later, when Natalie achieved the same, they took her out for a special dinner and bought her the charm bracelet she'd been wanting for months. "Natalie just works so hard," my mother would explain when I questioned the disparity. "You're naturally smart, Lucia. For Natalie, it's a real achievement." My accomplishments were expected. Hers were celebrated. I still remember my 16th birthday when I received practical gifts, clothes for school, and a new backpack, while Natalie's sweet 16 4 years later warranted a surprise party with 50 guests and the used car I had been saving up for myself. "Your sister is more social," Dad explained when I confronted him. "She needs the car more than you did at her age." These patterns weren't lost on my childhood friend Amanda Lewis, who lived 3 houses down. We became friends in 2nd grade when we discovered we both loved drawing and spent hours creating elaborate fantasy worlds on large sheets of paper spread across my bedroom floor. "Your parents are kind of hard on you," she observed one afternoon when we were 13 after my mother criticized the way I'd loaded the dishwasher while Natalie watched TV unburdened by chores. "They just expect more from me," I replied with the explanation I'd crafted to protect myself from the truth. Amanda was my sanctuary throughout middle school and early high school until Natalie entered middle school herself. Suddenly, Amanda found my sister so funny and cool, and increasingly I'd arrive at Amanda's house to find her and Natalie already giggling over inside jokes I wasn't part of. Despite the constant struggle for recognition, I channeled my energy into academics and creative pursuits. Architecture fascinated me from the time I was 15 and discovered a book about famous buildings in our school library. The idea of creating spaces that would outlast me, that would shelter and inspire others long after I was gone, became my passion. I worked part-time jobs through high school to save for college, knowing that while my parents had a college fund for both of us, they had made it clear that Natalie's education at her dream school would take priority if financial choices had to be made. My efforts paid off when I received a partial scholarship to the University of Washington's architecture program. Seattle was far enough from Chicago to give me the fresh start I desperately craved. When I announced my college choice at dinner, my parents seemed almost relieved. "That's so far away," my mother noted, her tone suggesting this was a positive development. "The distance will be good for you," my father added. "Help you become more independent." What went unspoken was how my absence would allow them to focus even more completely on Natalie. I excelled in college and later secured a position at a respected architecture firm in Seattle. My life was taking shape. I had professional success, a small circle of loyal friends, and a growing confidence that came from building a life on my own terms. I called home, monthly visits became annual affairs at Christmas, and I settled into a relationship with my family that was cordial but distant. Each time I returned to Chicago, the same patterns played out. Natalie, who had attended Northwestern and remained in Chicago after graduation, was the sun around which my parents orbited. Her job as a marketing executive, her apartment, her friends, her dating life, all were topics of enthusiastic discussion. My career achievements, my life in Seattle, my own circle of friends. These warranted polite but brief attention before conversation inevitably shifted back to Natalie. I accepted this dynamic as unchangeable. I had built a life 3,000 miles away precisely to escape it. What I couldn't have known was how this lifelong pattern of favoritism was merely the foundation for a betrayal that would leave me standing alone on what should have been the happiest day of my life. I met James Wilson at an architecture conference in Seattle during a breakout session on sustainable urban design. He was presenting research on incorporating green spaces into corporate structures, and his passion for both environmental responsibility and beautiful design captured my attention immediately. With dark, wavy hair that fell across his forehead when he got excited about a point, and warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, James was as physically attractive as he was intellectually stimulating. After his presentation, I approached him with questions about one of his case studies. Our discussion continued through coffee, then dinner, and finally a walk along the waterfront as the sun set over Puget Sound. By the time we exchanged phone numbers, I knew I had met someone special. "I've never met anyone who gets as excited about load-bearing walls as I do," he joked on our third date. "That's because most people have normal interests," I replied, making him laugh. Our relationship developed steadily over the next 2 years. James worked for a rival architecture firm, which added a playful competitive element to our connection. We challenged each other professionally while supporting each other personally. For the first time, I experienced what unconditional support felt like. When James introduced me to his family 6 months into our relationship, I was overwhelmed by their warmth. His parents, Robert and Catherine Wilson, welcomed me into their Seattle home with genuine interest in getting to know me. His younger brother, Thomas, and older sister, Maria, treated me like I'd always been part of their family circle. Sunday dinners at the Wilson house became a highlight of my month, filled with lively debates, good-natured teasing, and the kind of easy affection I'd always craved from my own family. "Your family is amazing," I told James after one such dinner as we drove back to my apartment. "They can be a bit much sometimes," he admitted with a chuckle. "But they mean well. Trust me, a bit much is wonderful compared to the alternative." It was during the Christmas holiday of our second year together that James finally met my family. We flew to Chicago for 4 days, staying in my childhood bedroom that had long since been converted to a generic guest room with no trace of my youth remaining. From the moment we arrived, the contrast between our families was painfully obvious. My parents gave James a polite but cursory welcome before immediately turning the conversation to Natalie's recent promotion. During dinner that first night, my mother asked James exactly 4 questions about himself before launching into a 15-minute monologue about Natalie's achievements. I watched James's expression shift from eager to please to confused to concerned as he observed the family dynamic I had tried to prepare him for. But that had to be seen to be believed. The pattern continued throughout our stay. My parents scheduled a family dinner at their favorite restaurant, but consulted only Natalie about the reservation time. When James mentioned my recent success leading a major downtown renovation project, my father nodded distractedly before asking Natalie about her dating life. On our last night, Natalie arrived late to dinner with a dramatic story about a minor fender bender that commanded everyone's attention for the remainder of the evening. "Is it always like this?" James asked quietly as we packed our bags the next morning. "Actually, they've been on better behavior because you're here," I replied, attempting humor to mask the hurt. In the taxi to the airport, James took my hand and looked me straight in the eyes. "I need you to know something, Lucia. I see how special you are, even if they don't show it. Their inability to appreciate you isn't a reflection of your worth. It's their loss." I cried the entire flight back to Seattle, not from sadness, but from the profound relief of being truly seen and validated for perhaps the first time in my life. 6 months later, during a trip to Japan, we had planned to see the cherry blossoms James proposed under a canopy of pink blooms in Kyoto. The vintage emerald and diamond ring had belonged to his grandmother, and as he slid it onto my finger, I felt like I was finally finding my place in the world. "I want to build a life with you," he said, his voice steady and sure. "A home where you never question your place or your worth." Through happy tears, I accepted, believing that perhaps this wedding, this commitment would finally be the occasion where my family would show up for me, truly show up, both physically and emotionally. I called my parents the next day from our hotel room in Tokyo, the 13-hour time difference meaning I woke them early in the morning. I still remember the groggy confusion in my mother's voice when she answered. "Mom, James proposed last night," I announced, unable to contain my excitement. "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," she replied, her voice warming slightly as she woke up more fully. "Have you set a date yet?" No congratulations, no questions about how he proposed, no request to see the ring over video chat, just a practical question about scheduling. "Not yet, but we're thinking next fall, maybe October. That gives us about 14 months to plan." "That's good. Plenty of time to figure things out," she said. "I should get your father. Michael Lucia's engaged." I heard my father's muffled voice in the background, and then he came on the line. "Congratulations, kiddo. James seems like a solid guy." The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes before my mother mentioned needing to get ready for a hair appointment. As I hung up, James wrapped his arms around me from behind. "That seemed brief." I leaned back against his chest. At least they didn't mention Natalie. But as I would soon discover, Natalie would become central to what should have been my moment in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The wedding planning process began with optimism that quickly faded into disappointment. I had 14 months to plan what I hoped would be a meaningful celebration with our closest family and friends. I envisioned my mother and I bonding over dress shopping, venue visits, and floral arrangements, all the traditional mother-daughter wedding activities I'd seen friends experience. Reality proved starkly different. My first attempt to involve my mother came 2 months after our engagement. I scheduled a weekend trip to Chicago specifically for dress shopping and called her 3 weeks in advance to make sure she'd be available. "Of course, honey. I've put it on my calendar," she assured me. I arrived in Chicago on a Friday afternoon in November, checked into my hotel, and texted my mother to confirm our Saturday morning appointment at the bridal boutique. Hours passed with no response. When I finally called that evening, my father answered. "Oh, Lucia, your mother forgot to tell you. Her book club is hosting a special event tomorrow with that author she loves. She can't miss it, they've been planning it for months. She assumed you could reschedule the appointment." The boutique couldn't accommodate a reschedule during my brief visit. I ended up dress shopping alone, taking selfies in wedding gowns, and sending them to my college roommate for opinions, fighting back tears as other brides were surrounded by enthusiastic mothers, sisters, and friends. When I found the one, an elegant A-line gown with delicate lace detailing that made me feel both beautiful and comfortable, the boutique owner noticed my solitude. "No one with you today, dear?" she asked kindly. "My fiancé's mother will help with alterations later," I replied, not wanting to admit the truth. That pattern continued through every aspect of wedding planning. My mother was always too busy, had other commitments, or simply trusted my judgment when I sought her input. Meanwhile, Catherine James's mother stepped in with genuine enthusiasm, joining me for venue visits when she flew to Seattle for a weekend, helping address invitations and sending me thoughtful articles and ideas she thought might match our vision. "I don't want to overstep," Catherine said during one of our planning sessions. "I know your mother would normally take the lead on these things." "You're not overstepping," I assured her. "I'm grateful for your help." 9 months before the wedding, we sent out save-the-date cards to our guest list of 120 people, including my extended family, aunts, uncles, and cousins on both sides. I called my parents the day they should have received theirs. "Did you get something special in the mail today?" I asked, trying to sound excited rather than anxious. "Yes, it's lovely," my mother replied. "October 12th at the Lakeview Gardens. We've marked our calendar." Her tone was pleasant but not enthusiastic. Still, I clung to the hope that as the date approached, her interest would grow. Around the same time, I reached out to Amanda, my childhood friend, who had drifted into Natalie's orbit but still exchanged birthday texts and occasional phone calls with me. "Would you be my maid of honor?" I asked during one such call. "I know we don't talk as much as we used to, but you've known me longer than anyone, and it would mean a lot to have you stand with me." Her enthusiasm seemed genuine. "I'd be honored." "Oh my God, I can't believe you're getting married. Of course I'll be there." I sent Amanda details about the wedding and her responsibilities, which she acknowledged with promises to help in any way she could. For a brief period, I felt like pieces were falling into place. Then came the first hint of trouble 5 months before the wedding. During my monthly call home, my mother mentioned that Natalie had started dating someone new. "His name is Harrison Parker," she gushed. "His family owns that chain of luxury hotels. You know, the ones they have properties in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago." "That's nice," I replied, trying to steer the conversation back to wedding details. "So, about the rehearsal dinner. Harrison took Natalie to Paris for just a weekend. Can you imagine, private jet and everything? Your father and I are having dinner with his parents next week." The remainder of the call centered around Natalie and Harrison's whirlwind romance. My wedding was mentioned only in passing. As the months progressed, my check-in calls with family became increasingly frustrating. My parents seemed distracted, offering vague responses to specific questions about travel arrangements, accommodations, and whether certain relatives had mentioned attending. "Everyone's looking forward to it," my father would say dismissively when I asked if my grandmother had booked her flight from Florida. Meanwhile, Amanda became progressively harder to reach. She missed a virtual meeting to discuss the bridal shower, citing work commitments. She was slow to respond about her bridesmaid dress measurements. When I managed to reach her by phone, our conversations were brief and strangely formal. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked her directly 4 months before the wedding. "Of course, just swamped with work and some family stuff. But I'm so excited for your big day." Her reassurance temporarily calmed my growing anxiety, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. James noticed my stress increasing with each disappointing interaction with my family. "We can scale back if you want," he offered one night after I hung up from another unsatisfying call with my mother. "Make it a smaller ceremony, just people we know will be fully present." "No," I insisted. "This is our day. I want to celebrate properly, even if my family can't muster much enthusiasm." What I didn't realize then was that lack of enthusiasm was just the beginning. The true betrayal was still taking shape, hidden behind excuses and vague reassurances, waiting to break my heart in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The first clear sign that something was seriously wrong came exactly 6 months before our wedding date. My mother called me an unusual occurrence in itself, as I was almost always the one to initiate contact. "Natalie has some exciting news," she announced, her voice bubbling with happiness I rarely heard when speaking to me. Harrison has been taking her to look at engagement rings, nothing official yet, but we think he'll propose soon. My stomach dropped. Not because I begrudged my sister happiness, but because of the timing and my mother's tone, as if this possibility overshadowed my actual planned wedding. That's great, I managed. Has she mentioned when they might get engaged? These things can't be rushed, my mother replied. But they've only been dating 6 months, and already he's talking about rings. Your father and I have never seen her so happy. The implication hung unspoken. Natalie's whirlwind romance somehow meant more than my thoughtful, intentional engagement after 2 years of building a relationship. 4 months before my wedding, the other shoe dropped. Natalie called me directly, something she rarely did. Lucia, guess what Harrison proposed last night? We're engaged. Despite my growing unease, I offered sincere congratulations. That's wonderful news, Natalie. Have you thought about dates yet? Not specifically, she replied, but probably next spring or summer. Harrison's parents know people at all the best venues in Chicago, so they can help us get whatever date we want. I felt a small relief. A spring or summer wedding the following year meant no conflict with my October ceremony. I'm really happy for you, I said, and I meant it. Looking forward to meeting Harrison at my wedding. There was a slight pause. Right, your wedding. About that. But she didn't continue, instead quickly changing the subject to ask about my work. The conversation ended with her promising to send pictures of her ring. Around the same time, Amanda became even more elusive. She missed the online bridal shower planning meeting that James's sister was trying to coordinate with her. When Maria, James's sister, finally reached her by phone, Amanda claimed to have mixed up the dates and apologized profusely. Something feels off about her, Maria told me afterward. She seemed really distracted, and when I mentioned specific dates for the shower, she kept saying she needed to check her calendar but never got back to me. 3 months before the wedding, my parents suggested something that should have been my first serious warning. Honey, my mother began during our monthly call, have you and James considered postponing the wedding? Postponing? Why would we do that? Everything's planned and deposits are paid. It's just that things are getting so busy here, she said vaguely. And with Natalie's engagement. My wedding has been on the calendar for over a year, I reminded her, trying to keep my voice steady. What does Natalie's engagement have to do with it? Nothing. She backpedaled, just thinking about how much is going on for everyone. 2 months before the wedding, while scrolling through social media, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Amanda had posted a photo of herself with Natalie, heads bent together over what looked like party planning materials. The caption read, "Planning something special with this bride-to-be, #excited, #I can't wait." I immediately texted Amanda. Saw your post with Natalie? What are you two planning? Her response came hours later. Just helping her with some engagement party ideas. Nothing big. When I called her that evening, she sounded uncomfortable. It's just a small thing her friends wanted to do to celebrate the engagement. You know how Natalie is. She loves being the center of attention. When is this party? I asked directly. They haven't set a date yet, Amanda replied quickly. Just preliminary ideas. 6 weeks before my wedding, I attended my final dress fitting alone. Catherine had offered to fly in, but I assured her it wasn't necessary, still clinging to the hope that my mother would make a last-minute decision to join me. She didn't. As I stood in the beautiful gown that now fit me perfectly, I caught my reflection in the mirror. A bride with no mother, no sister, no maid of honor by her side. I broke down in tears right there in the boutique. Wedding planning can be so emotional, the seamstress said kindly, offering me tissues. She had no idea. 1 month before the wedding, the RSVP deadline arrived. James and I sat at our dining table sorting through response cards. His family's responses had all arrived weeks earlier, enthusiastic yeses with personal notes of congratulations. My family's section of the spreadsheet remained distressingly empty. Your parents haven't sent their RSVP, James noted gently. Neither has Amanda, I added, staring at the empty boxes on our tracking sheet. Or any of my relatives. I called my parents that night, my anxiety now impossible to ignore. Mom, we haven't received your RSVP card, or Natalie's, or anyone's from our family, actually. Oh, I'm sure I mailed it, she said unconvincingly. But yes, we'll be there. Of course we will. And Natalie, Amanda, Aunt Susan, and Uncle Dave, Cousin Brian? No one has responded. Everyone's just busy, Lucia. You know how people are with these things. I'm sure they'll all come. Her vague reassurance did nothing to calm my growing sense of dread. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't yet imagine just how wrong it was about to become. 2 weeks before my wedding day, I received the phone call that shattered any remaining illusions about my place in my family. It was a Tuesday evening. James was working late, and I was finalizing seating arrangements when my phone lit up with my mother's name. Lucia, she began, her voice carrying an odd mix of determination and discomfort. There's something we need to discuss about the wedding. My heart immediately began racing. What about it? Well, the thing is, Natalie and Harrison have decided to have their engagement party on October 12th. The date hung in the air between us. October 12th, my wedding day. The date that had been set for 14 months. The date on the Save the Cards sent 9 months prior. The date on formal invitations mailed 3 months ago. That's my wedding day, I stated, my voice hollow with disbelief. I know, and it's unfortunate, my mother continued as if we were discussing a minor scheduling conflict. But Harrison's parents can only host that weekend because they're leaving for Europe the following week for a month. The Parker estate is the perfect venue, and they've already arranged for a renowned chef to cater. I struggled to process what I was hearing. Mom, are you saying you're going to miss my wedding for Natalie's engagement party? A pause. Sweetheart, try to understand. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Natalie to connect with Harrison's family properly. The Parkers are very influential people. And my wedding, the one you've known about for more than a year, that's not a once-in-a-lifetime event. You've always been so independent, Lucia, my mother replied, her tone suggesting this was a compliment rather than an excuse for abandonment. And you've done all the planning without much input from us anyway. Natalie needs our support right now. This engagement could set her up for life. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Who else is choosing her party over my wedding? The silence that followed told me everything before she even spoke. Your father and I think it's important we present a united family front to the Parkers, and Natalie specifically asked for your grandmother to be there since Harrison's grandmother is attending. So everyone, I whispered. My entire family is skipping my wedding for her engagement party. Not everyone, my mother said weakly. Just the immediate family and a few close relatives. And Amanda is my maid of honor, also attending Natalie's party instead of standing beside me at my wedding. Another telling pause. Amanda is, well, she's helping host the event. She and Natalie have become quite close, you know, being in Chicago together all these years while you've been in Seattle. The betrayal was so complete it felt physically painful, like a blow to my chest that knocked the air from my lungs. My family, my best friends since childhood, all of them had collectively decided that Natalie's last-minute engagement party took precedence over the wedding I had planned meticulously for more than a year. I see, I managed, my voice barely audible. Lucia, please try to understand. I understand perfectly. I cut her off, surprising myself with the sudden coldness in my tone. You've made your choice very clear, all of you. I hung up before she could respond, before the tears that were building could spill over. For several minutes, I sat perfectly still at my dining room table, surrounded by seating cards with the names of people who would never attend. When James came home an hour later, he found me on the bathroom floor sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. Through broken sentences, I explained what had happened. James's face transformed from concern to shock to barely controlled anger as he understood the full extent of the betrayal. He gathered me in his arms, rocking me gently as I cried. "We can postpone," he offered when my tears finally subsided. "Push the wedding back a few months, or we can elope, just the two of us." "No," I said, sudden clarity cutting through my grief. "I'm not rearranging my life around their cruelty anymore. We're getting married on October 12th as planned. If they choose not to be there, that's their loss." The week before the wedding brought confirmation of what I already knew. Not a single member of my family sent an RSVP. Amanda finally sent a text message 3 days before the wedding. "I'm so sorry I can't make it. Natalie really needs me right now, and I promised I'd help with her big day." Her big day, not mine. James's parents were outraged on my behalf when they learned what had happened. "I've never heard of such selfishness," Catherine declared when we told them. "To think they would all choose an engagement party which could be held literally any other day over your wedding. It's their loss," Robert added firmly. "And Lucia, if you'll allow me, I would be honored to walk you down the aisle in your father's absence." I accepted through fresh tears, overwhelmed by the contrast between my own family's abandonment and the Wilson family's unwavering support. In the final days before the wedding, I swung between grief rage and a strange sense of liberation. The family dynamics that had shaped and often hurt me throughout my life had reached their logical conclusion. There was a painful clarity in having the unspoken finally made explicit I would never be the priority. Never be enough, never be chosen. But amid that painful revelation came another truth. I had built a life filled with people who did choose me, who did see my worth. James, his family, my friends from college and work, they were showing up not out of obligation, but out of love. The night before our wedding, James asked once more if I wanted to postpone. "It's not too late," he said gently. "We can call the venue, explain the situation." I took his face in my hands and looked into his eyes. "Tomorrow, I'm marrying the love of my life, surrounded by people who genuinely want to be there. That's more than enough for me." The morning of my wedding day dawned clear and crisp, a perfect October Saturday in Seattle. I woke in the hotel suite I'd shared with my 2 bridesmaids, close friends from my architecture firm, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Grief and disappointment still lurked beneath the surface, but they were increasingly overshadowed by a sense of determination and even defiance. "Today is happening on my terms," I told my reflection as I brushed my teeth. "Their absence doesn't define this day." Catherine arrived at 9 o'clock with breakfast pastries and a calm maternal presence that soothed my ragged nerves. She helped coordinate with the hairstylist and makeup artist, took photos as my bridesmaids and I prepared, and handled last-minute calls from vendors with effortless grace. "I brought you something," she said quietly as the makeup artist was finishing with my bridesmaids. From her purse, she withdrew a small blue velvet box, something borrowed and blue as well. Inside was a delicate sapphire bracelet. "It was my mother's," Catherine explained as she fastened it around my wrist. "She wore it at my wedding, and I'd like you to wear it at yours." I fought back tears that would have ruined my freshly applied makeup. "Thank you for being here," I whispered. "For everything." "Oh, sweetheart," she replied, squeezing my hands. "We're family now. This is exactly where I should be." The hours passed in a blur of activity. Hair styled, makeup perfected, photographs taken. When the time came to put on my wedding dress, Catherine and my bridesmaids helped me into the elegant lace gown that had brought me to tears during my solitary fitting. "You look absolutely beautiful," Catherine said, her eyes glistening. For a moment, standing there in my complete bridal ensemble, I felt a fresh wave of sadness that my own mother wasn't witnessing this transformation. I allowed myself 10 seconds to acknowledge the pain, then deliberately pushed it aside. "Let's do this," I said with a smile that felt increasingly genuine. Before leaving for the ceremony, I had a moment alone in the suite. I checked my phone one last time, a habit I couldn't break despite knowing what I would find. No messages from my parents. No texts from Natalie. No last-minute apology from Amanda. Just a screen of silence that confirmed what I already knew. No one from my past was coming to witness my future. The ceremony venue, Lakeview Gardens, was a glass-walled structure overlooking one of Seattle's beautiful lakes, surrounded by meticulously maintained grounds blazing with fall colors. As our car approached, I could see guests arriving, being seated, the scene taking shape exactly as I had planned it over the past year. Except for the empty front row where my family should have been. Robert was waiting for me at the garden entrance, handsome in his dark suit, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he saw me emerge from the car. "Lucia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am so proud to stand in for your father today, though I wish for your sake he had made a better choice." I took his offered arm. "I'm grateful it's you, Robert, truly." The string quartet began playing as my bridesmaids processed into the garden. Then the music changed to the wedding march I had selected months ago, and Robert and I began our walk down the aisle. I kept my eyes fixed on James, who stood waiting for me with an expression of such love and pride that it pushed everything else into the background. His best man, his brother Thomas, stood beside him, grinning broadly. James's extended family filled several rows, all beaming at me as I passed. When we reached the altar, Robert placed my hand in James's and stepped back. The officiant, a family friend of the Wilsons, welcomed everyone with genuine warmth. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Lucia and James, two souls who have found in each other the perfect companion for life's journey." The ceremony proceeded exactly as planned. The readings we had selected, the vows we had written for each other, the exchange of rings. When James spoke his vows, his voice steady and sure, one line in particular pierced straight through to my heart. "I promise to be your family," he said, holding my gaze, "your safe harbor and your strongest advocate every day for the rest of our lives." He knew exactly what those words meant to me, and I nearly broke down at the intentional promise they contained. After the pronouncement, after our first kiss as husband and wife, we turned to face our guests, the people who had chosen to witness our commitment. The applause was enthusiastic, genuine, filling the space with joy that pushed back against the empty chairs in the front row. The reception was held in the garden's main hall, transformed with fairy lights, fall flowers, and elegant table settings. As we took our seats at the head table, I noticed James's family had rearranged themselves to fill in the spaces left by my absent relatives. Catherine sat where my mother should have been. Robert occupied my father's chair. Maria had taken the place reserved for Amanda. They had closed ranks around us, ensuring there were no visible gaps in our celebration. Halfway through the reception, as guests were finishing their main course, I excused myself to visit the restroom. Alone for a moment, I checked my phone out of habit and saw notifications from social media. Against my better judgment, I opened the app. The algorithm, knowing my connections, had prioritized a post from Natalie. There on my screen was a photo of her engagement party happening at that very moment across the country. My parents stood on either side of her, champagne glasses raised, broad smiles on their faces. Amanda was there too, arm around Natalie, looking happier than she had in any recent interaction with me. The caption read, "Celebrating our engagement with the people who matter most, #blessed, #family. The people who matter most." I stared at the image until it blurred through my tears. The physical evidence of their choice displayed proudly for all to see felt like the final twist of the knife. I don't know how long I stood there, in the elegant bathroom, gripping the marble countertop, trying to breathe through the pain. Eventually, a soft knock at the door broke through my trance. "Lucia, are you okay?" It was Maria James's sister. I opened the door, unable to hide my tears or the phone still displaying Natalie's post. Maria took one look at the screen and at my face, then wrapped me in a fierce hug. "They don't deserve you," she whispered fiercely. "Not a single one of them." Thomas appeared behind her concern evident on his face. When he saw my distress, he immediately stepped forward. "What can we do?" he asked simply. I took a deep breath, wiped my eyes, and straightened my shoulders. "Dance with me," I said. "Both of you. Help me remember who's actually here today." We returned to the reception hall together, and Thomas immediately requested that the band play something upbeat. He led me onto the dance floor, soon joined by Maria, then Catherine and Robert, then James, who took me into his arms with a question in his eyes. I nodded to let him know I was okay, not perfect, but okay. Surrounded by the Wilson family and my true friends dancing to music we had chosen in the venue we had selected together, I felt something unexpected begin to bloom within the pain, gratitude. Gratitude for the clear-eyed truth about who would show up for me when it mattered. Gratitude for the family I was marrying into, who demonstrated what unconditional love actually looked like. Gratitude even for the stark contrast that made me appreciate the genuine connections in my life all the more keenly. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur of dancing toasts, cake cutting, and laughter. When James and I had our first dance as husband and wife, he held me close and whispered, "You are the strongest person I know, and I am in awe of you today." In that moment, surrounded by people who had chosen to celebrate us, who had prioritized our joy over other commitments, I felt something shift inside me. The absence of my blood relatives still hurt a dull ache beneath the celebration, but it no longer defined the day. We were creating something new, James and I. A partnership, a family of our own choosing. As the evening drew to a close and we prepared to leave for our hotel, Catherine pressed something into my hand, a small envelope. "Read this later," she said, kissing my cheek. In the privacy of our hotel suite, I opened it to find a card with a simple message. "Welcome to the family, Lucia. Today is just the beginning. All our love, Mom and Dad Wilson." I showed it to James, who smiled and held me close. "They mean it, you know. You're one of us now, irrevocably, completely." "I know," I replied, and for the first time that day, I cried tears that were purely of gratitude, untainted by grief. Our honeymoon in Portugal provided a much-needed escape from the emotional tumult surrounding our wedding. For 10 days, James and I explored coastal villages, sampled local wines, and lost ourselves in the simple joy of being newlyweds. Away from Seattle, away from Chicago, away from the painful absence of my family, I began to process everything that had happened. I keep thinking I should feel angrier. I admitted to James as we sat on the balcony of our Lisbon hotel watching the sunset paint the city golden. But mostly I just feel free, like I've been released from a lifelong obligation to seek approval I was never going to get. James took my hand, his new wedding band catching the fading light. "Your family made their choice very clear. You don't owe them your continued emotional investment." I nodded, sipping my wine thoughtfully. It's like I've been carrying this weight for so long, trying to be good enough, important enough, worthy of their attention, and now I can just put it down. The realization didn't erase the hurt, but it transformed it into something I could examine with growing detachment. Each day in Portugal, each new experience shared with James helped solidify my focus on the future rather than the past. When we returned to Seattle, reality awaited in the form of messages from my mother. As if nothing had happened, she had texted, "Hope you had a lovely ceremony. Send us some pictures when you can." The casual dismissal of her absence, the complete lack of acknowledgement of the magnitude of their betrayal, momentarily reignited my anger. I showed the message to James, who looked as incredulous as I felt. "Are they serious?" he asked, scrolling through similar messages from my father, and even one from Natalie thanking me for understanding about her engagement party. "Apparently, they've rewritten history already," I replied. "In their version, they've done nothing wrong." Initially, I attempted reconciliation. I called my mother and tried to express how deeply hurt I was by their collective decision to skip my wedding. "Sweetheart, you're making too much of this," she replied dismissively. "These things happen with scheduling conflicts. Natalie's party was wonderful, by the way. Harrison's parents have invited us to their summer home in the Hamptons next year." No apology, no recognition. Just more evidence that Natalie's connections were the priority. After that conversation, I began therapy, something I should have done years earlier. For 3 months, I worked with Dr. Elaine Matthews, unpacking the patterns of my childhood, the family dynamics that had shaped me, and the fresh wound of the wedding day betrayal. "What you're describing is a lifetime of emotional neglect," Dr. Matthews observed during one session. "Your wedding day was simply the most overt manifestation of a pattern that's existed since your childhood." With her guidance, I began the process of establishing boundaries, something that had never existed in my relationship with my family. I limited calls to once a month. I stopped asking about Natalie or expressing interest in her engagement. I declined a Christmas invitation to Chicago, opting instead to spend the holiday with James's family in Seattle. "I'm worried I'm being petty," I confessed to Dr. Matthews after making these decisions. "Boundaries aren't punishment," she reminded me. "They're protection. You're not withdrawing to hurt them. You're creating space to heal yourself." That perspective helped me navigate the complex emotions of setting limits with people who had never respected them before. My parents were initially confused, then irritated by my new approach. My mother's calls became more frequent when she realized I wasn't initiating contact, her messages more demanding. "Your father and I don't understand why you're being so distant," she complained in February, 4 months after the wedding. "Is this still about the wedding? You need to let that go." "I'm not being distant," I replied calmly, using the techniques I'd practiced in therapy. "I'm creating a relationship that works for me now." As winter turned to spring, James's family became even more integrated into our lives. Sunday dinners at Catherine and Robert's home were a weekly tradition. Maria and I began a book club together. Thomas helped us renovate our kitchen, spending weekends covered in dust and paint as we transformed our space. This was what family could be, I realized. People who showed up, who made time, who remembered the things that mattered to you without being reminded. Amanda reached out once about 6 months after the wedding. Her message was tentative. "Hey stranger, long time no talk. How have you been?" As if she had simply lost touch rather than chosen my sister's engagement party over her role as my maid of honor. After careful consideration, I replied with simple honesty. "I've been rebuilding my life with people who prioritize me the way I prioritize them. I wish you well, Amanda, but I've moved on from our friendship." It was surprisingly easy to let her go once I recognized that our friendship had actually ended years earlier when she began gravitating toward Natalie. The wedding day choice was merely the final acknowledgement of where her loyalty truly lay. 1 year after our wedding, James and I celebrated our anniversary with a small dinner party at our home. Catherine and Robert were there along with Maria and Thomas and a few close friends who had stood by us on our wedding day. The conversation flowed easily. The food was delicious, and as I looked around the table at these people who had chosen to be part of our lives, I felt a profound sense of peace. Later that night, as James and I cleaned up after our guests had left, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. Happy anniversary, Mrs. Wilson, he murmured against my hair. Any regrets? I turned in his embrace to face him. About marrying you, not a single one. About everything else. The wedding, your family. I considered the question seriously. I regret holding on to the hope that they would change for so long. I regret not recognizing sooner that I deserved better treatment. But I don't regret the wedding day itself. It showed me with perfect clarity who belonged in my life going forward. James nodded understanding as always. Their empty seats made room for the right people. Exactly. I agreed, the truth of it resonating deeply. The empty seats at my wedding made room for something greater, the truth about who really deserved to be in my life. That realization became the foundation for the next chapter of my life. I focused my energy on nurturing relationships with people who showed up consistently, who celebrated my successes without qualification, who made me feel valued rather than constantly striving to prove my worth. I maintained minimal contact with my parents and Natalie, not out of spite, but as a form of self-preservation. Our interactions became cordial but distant, holiday cards exchanged, occasional phone calls that remained superficial. They never acknowledged the wedding day betrayal, and eventually I stopped expecting them to. Instead, I found unexpected freedom in releasing my need for their approval or understanding. I discovered that family could be created rather than merely inherited, chosen rather than assigned. The people who gathered around our table each Sunday, who remembered our anniversaries, who showed up when life was challenging, they became my true family. The painful absence at my wedding ultimately made space for this greater truth. Love is proven in actions, not claimed in words. The people who show up are the ones who truly care. And sometimes the family you create is far stronger, far more nurturing than the one you were born into. So, if you're watching this and feeling unappreciated or unseen by your family, remember that you deserve people who prioritize you, who celebrate your milestones, who show up when it matters most. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to recognize who truly deserves a place in your life. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who consistently let you down? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and self-discovery. Thank you for listening to my journey. May you find the courage to surround yourself with people who truly value you just as you are.